The days had begun to blend together for her in a way she had never experienced before. Morning, afternoon, and night felt almost the same, marked only by hospital visits. Appointment reminders on her phone. In quiet moments of fear, she tried her best to hide from everyone around her. She had always been the strong one in her family, the person people went to for help, the one who kept her voice steady, even when she was sad. But this time, things were different. This time, she felt as if her strength was slowly slipping through her fingers, no matter how tightly she tried to hold on. Her younger brother had always been the cheerful one, the one who made jokes at the dinner table and found reasons to smile even on difficult days. Seeing him now tired, weak, and trying to act brave made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. The doctors had been clear. He needed a marrow donor, and he needed one soon. The family had already been tested, but none of them were a match. That news alone had broken something inside her. She had cried that night in the hallway of the hospital, quietly, with her hand pressed against her mouth so no one would hear. But the next morning, she wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and decided she was going to do everything she could. She wasn't going to give up, and so began her search that felt endless. She created community posts online, wrote messages for bulletin boards, talked to community groups, and even approached strangers politely to share her brother's situation. It was not easy. Every time she explained the story, she could feel her voice shake just slightly, but she kept going. When people agreed to do the initial screening, she felt a small spark of hope light up inside her. Maybe this person would be the one. Maybe this would be the match that could save her brother. In the first few weeks alone, she met nearly 20 volunteers. Each one seemed kind and willing, and she thanked every single person with genuine respect. She sat with some of them in the hospital waiting area, where the fluorescent lights flickered softly and the smell of sanitizer drifted through the air. She tried to make casual conversation with them, asking how their day was or thanking them again for helping. She didn't want anyone to feel pressured or uncomfortable. She knew they didn't owe her anything, but she was grateful they tried. But after each screening, the same message kept coming from the hospital. Thank you for your effort, but the results are not a match. The first few times she heard those words, she nodded calmly and said she understood. But as more results came back, each negative result felt like someone gently closing a door in front of her. She tried not to let the sadness show, but sometimes her hands trembled when she held her phone to check for updates. She stopped eating properly, often forgetting meals because she spent so much time calling people, arranging appointments, or comforting her mother, who tried so hard to stay hopeful but often broke down when she thought no one was looking. Friends told her she was doing everything she could, but their words didn't touch the deep fear inside her. She felt responsible not because anyone blamed her, but because she blamed herself. She was the oldest, the protector, the one who always said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." But this was something she couldn't fix with effort alone. She needed a miracle, and miracles were unpredictable. Still, she continued the search, even when exhaustion pressed heavily on her shoulders. She began visiting different hospitals and screening centers. She joined support groups and listened to other families who had similar experiences. Hearing their stories helped her feel less alone, but it also reminded her how uncertain everything could be. Some people found matches quickly, others waited months, some never found one at all. She never said it out loud, but the fear of never followed her everywhere like a shadow. Some nights she sat beside her brother while he slept. The room was quiet, illuminated only by the soft blue light of a monitor. She would watch his chest rise and fall, steady but weaker than before. She gently adjusted his blanket, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, and whispered promises he couldn't hear. She told him she wouldn't stop. She told him she believed he would get better, and even though he was asleep, she felt a little stronger just saying the words. But the search wore her down in ways she had not expected. She found herself becoming anxious whenever her phone buzzed, hoping it was good news and preparing herself for disappointment at the same time. Her feet were often sore from walking, her eyes tired from reading medical documents she didn't fully understand, and her heart heavy from constantly hoping and hurting in the same breath. Her workplace had been understanding at first, but even there, she felt the pressure. She tried to keep up with her work responsibilities, but her mind kept drifting back to the hospital. She would reread the volunteer forms, check her brother's medication schedule, and rewrite her outreach messages. Sometimes during lunch, she sat quietly in a corner, fighting the urge to cry because she didn't want her coworkers to worry or ask questions she didn't know how to answer. Her friends invited her out occasionally, hoping to help her relax for a few hours, but she always declined politely. She didn't want to laugh or distract herself. She didn't want to enjoy anything when her brother was lying in a hospital bed. Instead, she stayed home, staring at her phone, waiting for updates or new volunteers to respond. She tried meditation videos, soft music, even walking outside in the early morning when the air was fresh and the streets empty, but her thoughts always returned to the same place: the test results. The donor list, the fear of running out of time. Her mother noticed the changes in her, the small dark circles under her eyes, the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, her mother gently placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You are doing your best. Don't forget to take care of yourself too." But she only nodded. Unable to explain that taking care of herself felt impossible when someone she loved needed so much help. Her father tried to stay strong as well, but she saw the sadness in his eyes. Every night, he sat in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper, but his gaze was distant. He rarely spoke about his fear, but she could hear it in the quiet moments between his breaths. Despite everything, she refused to give up. She woke up each morning with the same thought. Today might be the day. Today might be different. She checked her messages immediately, then made calls, scheduled screenings, and repeated the same cycle of hopeful waiting. Data became a routine, one that exhausted her but kept her going. Once, after a long day of meeting potential donors, she sat alone in the hospital cafeteria. The place was nearly empty, with only a few distant conversations echoing in the room. She wrapped her hands around a cup of warm tea and stared at the steam rising from it. The warmth felt comforting against her cold fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe. She imagined her brother healthy again, laughing as he used to. That image alone pushed her forward, but she also knew she couldn't continue like this forever. She felt stretched thin, like a string pulled too tight. She needed hope, real concrete hope to lift her again. And yet, she continued searching, because giving up was never an option. Because love, true, steady love for her family, was stronger than fear, stronger than exhaustion, stronger than the hundreds of no-match results she had received. She kept believing that somewhere, among all the people she hadn't met yet, there existed someone who could help. Maybe a kind person, maybe a stranger, maybe someone who didn't even know how important their decision would be. She didn't know who it would be, or when it would happen, but she held on to that small spark of hope inside her, protecting it like a fragile flame. She just didn't know that her journey was about to take a turn she never expected, because somewhere out there, someone was already walking toward her life quietly, unknowingly about to change everything. She first noticed him on a quiet afternoon when she was sitting in the hospital lobby, going through her notebook filled with names, numbers, and dates. The notebook had become her closest companion. Its worn pages carried pieces of her hope, her disappointment, and her determination. She was flipping through the pages for what felt like the 100th time when she heard someone clear their throat softly nearby. She looked up and saw a man standing a few steps away. He wasn't dressed in fancy clothes or anything that would draw attention. He looked simple, almost ordinary, with an easy expression on his face. But there was something calm about him, something steady that made people feel at ease even before he spoke. He hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to interrupt her. Then, with a quiet voice, he said, "Excuse me? I saw your message online. I came to ask if I can volunteer for the screening." For a second, she just blinked at him. She had received many responses over the weeks, and each time she met a new volunteer, she felt hopeful. But today, she had been exhausted, emotionally drained from the constant waves of waiting and worrying. She hadn't expected anyone new to show up without notice. His sudden appearance felt almost unreal. "You came today?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes. I thought it might be better to come in person instead of sending another message. I didn't want to bother you while you're already stressed." His words were gentle, and he spoke them in a way that showed he truly meant them. She closed her notebook slowly and stood up. She thanked him, and even though she tried to sound calm, a small spark of hope lit up inside her chest again. She tried to hide. It was too early to feel anything, but she couldn't help it. He smiled politely, but it wasn't a confident or loud smile. It was a simple smile that made him look kind and almost familiar, as if he carried warmth naturally. They walked toward the reception desk together to begin the necessary paperwork. As they waited in line, she noticed how he held his hands lightly in front of him, not fidgeting the way most people did when they were nervous. Instead, he simply stood quietly, looking around the waiting area with steady eyes. He didn't seem uneasy about being in a hospital or about the tests he was about to take. He seemed ready, calm in a way she wished she could be. When the receptionist asked him questions, he answered clearly and politely. He didn't look frustrated by the long form or the repeated inquiries. He remained patient through it all, and she found herself watching him, almost studying him. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was something different, something she couldn't define, a feeling that he was trustworthy. After the paperwork was completed, they were directed to a small waiting area. He sat down beside her, leaving just enough space so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. They waited mostly in silence at first. She didn't know what to say, and he didn't try to force a conversation. Instead, he sat quietly, hands folded, as if he understood she needed a moment to breathe. Finally, he turned slightly and asked softly, "How is your brother doing today?" The way he asked gently, without pity, made her chest tighten for a moment. Most people who asked about her brother didn't know how to phrase the question without sounding worried or uncomfortable. But he spoke as someone who genuinely cared, even though they had just met. "He's trying to stay positive," she replied. "Some days are harder for him, but he doesn't show it. He doesn't like worrying us." "That's brave," he said quietly, "and I'm sure it helps him to know you're fighting for him every day." His words surprised her. People often told her she was strong or doing her best, but hearing it from him felt different. Maybe because he said it without exaggeration or dramatic tone. He simply said it like a facsimile. He clearly believed. She looked at him more closely. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something gentle. She wondered what made him volunteer. Most people gave reasons like wanting to help, wanting to give back, or feeling moved by the story. But when she had first asked him why he came, he had said only, "If I can help, I want to try." No long explanation, no self-praise. He didn't come to be thanked. He came simply because it was the right thing to do. When his name was called for the test, he stood up and smiled at her. "I'll be back soon. Please don't worry." Something in his voice made her believe him. She nodded, and he disappeared behind the curtain with a medical staff member. While he was gone, she tried to distract herself by checking her messages and filling out updates in her notebook. But her mind kept drifting back to him. She didn't understand why. She had met dozens of volunteers. Some had been kind, some had been nervous, some had been determined, but none had given her the same quiet sense of reassurance that he had. She wasn't sure if it was his tone, his calmness, or just the timing appearing when she was feeling lost and tired. But she felt something different today, something that made her heart beat a little steadier. When he finally returned, she stood up without thinking. He walked over to her with that same simple smile. "All done," he said. "They said the results will take some time, but I'll wait however long it takes." She thanked him again, and he waved his hand gently. "No need to thank me every time. I'm just doing what anyone would do." But she knew not everyone would do this. Many people were afraid of medical tests. Many people didn't show up at all after saying they would. But he did. He came without hesitation. They walked out of the clinic together, and she expected him to say goodbye and leave. But instead, he turned to her and asked, "Is there anything else you need help with today? Maybe carrying something, or sharing information with more people? I can stay a little longer if you want." She was surprised. He had already done more than enough. She shook her head gently. "No, you've already helped a lot. You should go home and rest." He nodded. "All right, but if you need anything at all, just message me. I'll try my best to help." His sincerity felt so real that for a moment she didn't know what to say. She simply nodded again, watching him walk away with steady steps. After he left, she sat on a bench outside the hospital. The cold breeze touched her cheeks, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a strange warmth inside. She couldn't explain it. She didn't even try to. All she knew was that today had brought someone into her life who didn't feel like just another volunteer. He felt different, unexpected, comforting in a quiet way. That night, she found herself thinking about him again, not because she wanted to get attached, but because his presence had calmed something inside her she didn't realize was hurting so deeply. She told herself not to hope too much. Not about him being a match. Not about anything more. She had learned the hard way that high hopes often led to bigger disappointments. But even with her caution, she couldn't forget the peaceful feeling he brought with him. His soft-spoken nature, his patience, the sincerity in his eyes. It lingered in her mind long after the day ended. Little did she know that this man, who had walked into her life so quietly, would not just be another name on her donor list. He would become someone important, someone who would stay by her side through moments she didn't even know were coming, and although she tried to guard her heart, something inside her whispered that his arrival was not accidental. It felt like the beginning of something she didn't yet understand, something that would soon change everything. The days after his screening moved slowly, almost too slowly for her heart to handle. She had become used to waiting for results, but this time, it felt different. She checked her phone more often than usual, even though she knew the hospital would take at least a few days to respond. Still, every message notification made her sit up a little straighter, hoping it might be something from the hospital or from him. He didn't disappear after the screening, the way many volunteers did. Instead, he sent her a message that same evening asking if she had reached home safely. It was a simple question, written in polite words, but it made her pause for a moment. She wasn't used to people checking on her. Most friends and relatives cared about her brother's condition, but few asked how she was holding up personally. Even fewer did so gently, without pressure or prying. She replied with a short thank you, and he answered again almost immediately, saying, "Good, please take care of yourself." The message was short, but the warmth behind it stayed with her. Over the next few days, he checked in regularly, not too often to make her feel overwhelmed, but just enough to show he cared. Sometimes he shared encouraging words. Sometimes he asked if her brother ate well that day. Sometimes he simply wrote, "I'm here if you need anything," which somehow always arrived at the exact moment her worries felt heavy. He didn't try to take up space in her life. He didn't try to act like a hero or someone special. He was simply present, steady, and sincere. And that was exactly what she needed. One afternoon he messaged her to ask if she would be at the hospital that day. She told him she had a follow-up appointment with her brother's doctor. A few hours later, as she sat outside the consultation room, she heard a quiet voice behind her say, "Is this seat taken?" She turned and saw him standing there, holding a small paper bag in one hand. She blinked in surprise. "You came?" He nodded with a small smile. "I had some free time. Thought I could wait with you if that's okay." She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to ask why he cared so much. Another part felt relief wash over her, like cool rain on a hot day. She moved her bag aside and let him sit next to her. "What's in the bag?" she asked gently, trying to break the silence. "Oh," he said, almost embarrassed. Just some snacks. You hardly eat when you're stressed. I thought maybe you'd need something later. She stared at him for a few seconds, her eyes softening. No one, not even her close relatives, had noticed her strange habit of skipping meals on stressful days. Yet this man she barely knew had paid enough attention to see through her calm mask. "Thank you," she whispered. They waited together for the doctor, and during that time, he didn't ask any difficult questions. He didn't ask about test results, or worse, try to offer solutions she didn't ask for. Instead, he talked lightly about small things: the weather, a book he was reading, a funny story from work. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a peaceful tone that made her shoulders relax. Without her realizing it, she found herself laughing softly at something he said. The moment she heard her own laugh, she froze. It had been weeks since she last laughed. The sound felt strange, almost foreign. He noticed a change in her expression and asked carefully, "Did I say something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "It's just, I forgot what laughing feels like." He lowered his gaze for a moment, understanding her pain in a way most people didn't. "Then I'm glad you laughed," he said gently. "Even a small smile helps." She looked away, touched by the simplicity of his kindness. There was no pressure in his words, no expectation, just genuine care. When her brother came out from the doctor's room, he immediately noticed the man sitting beside her. She introduced them, and her brother gave him a small, tired smile. "So you're the volunteer," her brother said softly. He nodded humbly. "Yes, I hope the results turn out well." Her brother thanked him with a sincerity that made her eyes blur for a moment. The two spoke briefly, and she watched them, feeling something warm and hopeful in her chest. Over the next few days, the waiting continued. The hospital had given her a date for when the results might arrive, and as the day drew closer, she grew more anxious. Sleep became harder. Food tasted plain. Her thoughts spun constantly between hope and fear, but he didn't let her face the waiting alone. If she was at the hospital, he appeared whenever he could. If she stayed at home, he messaged her to check how she was feeling. Sometimes, they spoke for 10 minutes. Sometimes only a few seconds. But every interaction made her feel less alone. One evening, after her brother fell asleep, she and he sat in the small garden outside the hospital. The air was cool, and the lights above them glowed softly. They sat on a bench, watching people walk by, families holding hands, nurses on break, children playing nearby. The simple scene felt almost peaceful. "Do you ever feel scared?" she asked suddenly, not sure why she was opening up. He took a moment before answering. "Yes," he said honestly. "Everyone feels scared sometimes, but fear doesn't mean we stop trying." She looked at him, the moonlight catching the calm expression on his face. "You always seem so steady," she said. He smiled. "Maybe it looks that way, but I also worry. I just try not to show it too much." "What do you worry about?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then answered, "That I won't be able to help enough." His words struck her heart with unexpected emotion. He wasn't her family. He wasn't someone who owed her anything. Yet he worried about her brother the way a close friend might. "Just being here helps," she whispered. He didn't respond at first. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if absorbing her words without rushing to speak. Then he looked down at his hands and said, "I'm glad I can help, at least that much." The night went on quietly. They didn't need many words. Sometimes companionship wasn't about conversation, it was about presence. And his presence felt like a soft blanket on a cold night, warm enough to keep the fear from taking over. The day before the results were expected, she felt more nervous than ever. Her stomach twisted each time she thought about the upcoming call from the hospital. She tried to keep herself busy cleaning, making tea, rearranging her notes, but nothing managed to distract her for long. When her phone rang in the late afternoon, her heart almost stopped. It wasn't the hospital. It was him, she answered quickly. "Hello. I just wanted to ask," he said gently. "How are you holding up today?" She tried to say she was fine, but her voice broke slightly. "I'm scared." There was a pause on the other end. Then he said in a steady tone, "It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too." Her breath caught. Hearing him admit that made her feel strangely supported. She didn't have to pretend strength with him. She didn't have to hide her shaking voice. He continued, "Tomorrow will come, and whatever the results say, we will face it. You're not alone. I'm here." Those last 3 words, "I'm here," settled something in her heart. She didn't realize how much she needed to hear them until they reached her. They talked for a while, not about the test, not about medical updates, but about small things, memories from childhood, dreams for the future, funny moments from ordinary days. The more they spoke, the more she felt her fear melt into something lighter. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept without crying. The next morning arrived quietly. With soft sunlight streaming through the window, she woke up early, her heart pounding. Today was the day. Today the results would come. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding her phone, waiting for it to ring. And though she hadn't asked him to come, she somehow knew he would, because he had become something steady in her life. Something comforting, something she didn't yet dare to name. Little did she know, the moment she received those results would not only change her brother's life but hers too, in a way she never expected. The morning felt heavier than usual. She woke up with a nervous feeling that refused to leave her chest. Even the sunlight entering her room felt different. as if it was trying too hard to be comforting. She sat at the edge of her bed for several minutes, just staring at her phone. Today the blood match results would come. Today she would finally know if her long search would end, or if she would have to start all over again. She tried to calm herself by taking slow breaths, but her fingers still trembled. After forcing herself to get ready, she walked to the kitchen, but she couldn't bring herself to eat anything. A cup of warm tea sat untouched on the table. She kept glancing at her phone every few seconds, waiting for a call or message from the hospital. As she paced around the living room, her phone finally buzzed. Her heart jumped. But it wasn't the hospital at Wassam. His message said, "I'm outside. Take your time. No rush." Her breath caught. He had come without her asking, without being told. He simply knew she needed support today. She quickly grabbed her bag and stepped outside. And there he was, standing near the gate, holding 2 cups of warm coffee. When he saw her, he smiled gently. "Good morning," he said softly. "I thought you might need something warm." She accepted the cup with both hands, her cold fingers closing around it. "Thank you," she whispered, trying to hide the emotion in her voice. They walked together toward the hospital, neither speaking much at first. She felt too anxious, and he seemed to understand that silence was more comforting than any words. He walked close enough to show support, but not so close that she felt pressured. His presence alone eased some of her fear. When they reached the hospital waiting area, she sat down, but he remained standing for a moment, watching her with concern. "Do you want some water?" he asked. "Or maybe we can take a short walk until the call comes." She shook her head softly. I want to stay here. I don't want to miss the call." He nodded and sat beside her. For several long minutes they remained quiet, listening to the sounds of the hospital, soft footsteps, distant announcements, conversations blending into each other. She tried to focus on the sounds, hoping they would distract her from the nervousness building inside. After a while, he gently said, "No matter what happens, you've done everything you could. Your brother is lucky to have you." His voice was steady, calm, and so full of sincerity that she felt tears gather in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. I wish today brings good news," she whispered. "It will," he said softly, though he had no way of knowing. But the way he said it made her want to believe it. Then suddenly, her phone rang. The sound cut through the quiet waiting area, sharp and unexpected. Her heart almost stopped. She stared at the screen, her throat tightening when she saw the hospital's name. Her hands shook as she lifted the phone. He leaned forward slightly, not touching her, but ready to support her if she needed it. She pressed accept. She breathed. The voice on the other end introduced themselves politely, but she barely heard anything except the pounding in her ears. Then, in a calm tone, the person said, "We have the match results." Her breath caught. She squeezed the armrest of her chair. The voice continued. "The donor's markers match perfectly." For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. The world around her faded into a soft blur. She felt as if she were floating, unable to believe what she had just heard. "A perfect match," she whispered. Double quotes. "Yes," the voice confirmed. "You may come in today to discuss the next steps." She thanked them with a trembling voice and ended the call. Her hands were still shaking when she lowered the phone. She tried to speak, but no words came out. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did they say?" She turned to him slowly, her eyes wide and emotional. For a second, she couldn't form the words. Then finally, her lips curved into the smallest, softest smile. "It's a match," she whispered, her voice breaking. You're a perfect match." He froze. His eyes widened in surprise. What? Really?" She nodded, tears finally falling down her cheeks. She didn't even try to wipe them away. The relief was too heavy, too overwhelming. The months of worry, the exhaustion, the endless searching, they all came crashing together, melting into gratitude so strong it made her chest ache. She stood up slowly, still holding her phone. He stood up as well, still stunned. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Her voice was shaky and filled with emotion when she finally spoke. "You're my final choice?" she whispered. The words came out naturally, almost without thought, but they carried all the weight of her journey, her hope, her gratitude. They were not romantic words, not at that moment. They were words of trust, of deep relief, of a promise finally fulfilled. He took a breath, clearly moved. His eyes softened, and a warm expression spread across his face. "I'm glad I could help," he said, though his voice sounded unsteady with emotion. She didn't realize she was crying until he gently handed her a tissue he had in his pocket. She thanked him, unable to stop the tears, even though they were not tears of sadness, they were tears of hope, of finally feeling that a heavy door had opened after months of darkness. He placed a hand near her arm, not touching her, just close enough to show support. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to hold everything in anymore." Those words made her cry a little harder. She didn't feel embarrassed. She felt safe. After she calmed down a little, they walked to the doctor's room together. She felt lighter with every step, as if someone had lifted a burden she had carried for too long. He walked beside her quietly, matching his pace with hers. Inside the meeting room, the doctor explained the next steps. She listened carefully, nodding, taking notes, while he sat next to her, listening just as seriously. She kept glancing at him every few minutes, almost afraid he might change his mind. But each time she looked, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I'm ready for everything," he told the doctor calmly. "Just tell me what I need to do." Those words made her eyes fill again, though she blinked the tears away before anyone noticed. After the discussion, they stepped out into the hallway. The world looked different, brighter, warmer, full of hope. She had nearly forgotten how to feel. She stood there quietly, letting the moment sink in. He turned to her. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "More than okay," she whispered. He smiled. "Good. That's all I want." They walked outside together. She noticed how the sunlight touched his face gently, and for the first time, she felt something warm and new blooming quietly inside her chest. Something she didn't dare name yet. The journey was not over. There were steps to complete, procedures to follow, and days of recovery ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel scared. She felt hopeful. She felt supported. And when she looked at him again, she realized something very softly. Something she wasn't ready to say aloud. He wasn't just a donor. He was becoming someone important, someone she trusted, someone she didn't want to lose. And deep inside, she felt that this moment, the moment she whispered, "You're my final choice," was not the end of their story. It was the beginning. After the successful donation, life slowly began to return to a calmer rhythm for her and her family. The fear that had lived inside her chest for months finally softened. Her brother was recovering well, and every small improvement felt like a silent celebration. Doctors were hopeful, nurses were encouraging, and her home was finally filled with a sense of relief that had been missing for far too long. Yet even in this moment of peace, her heart kept returning to the man who had stepped into their lives at the perfect moment. She saw him often, not because he had to come, but because he chose to. He would visit the hospital to check on her brother, bringing small gifts like warm socks, books, or snacks the doctors said were allowed. He never made it seem like an obligation. Each visit felt natural, as though he had always been a part of their lives. The sincerity in his actions touched her deeply, even after her brother came home from the hospital. The man continued to come by, sometimes with soup he made himself, other times simply with a gentle smile and kind words. Her mother grew fond of him almost immediately. Her father respected him deeply, and her brother seemed to light up every time he walked through the door. It became obvious that he wasn't just a donor anymore. He had become someone important to all of them. But for her, the feeling was different, stronger, more confusing, more meaningful. She often found herself thinking about him when she least expected it. She would remember the quiet way he listened to her without judging her emotions. She remembered how carefully he carried her brother's chart when they first met. She remembered the look in his eyes when she opened the results. And most of all, she remembered the way he stood beside her in every moment of fear. He had become a calm presence in a storm that had once felt endless. Still, she wasn't sure how to express everything she felt. She worried about saying too much, or saying it too soon. She wondered if he felt something similar, or if he saw himself only as someone who helped a family in need. The uncertainty made her shy, even though she wanted to be open with him. One evening he came to visit with a simple smile and a bag of fresh fruit. Her brother was resting in his room, and her parents were out buying groceries. The house felt unusually quiet. For a moment, she felt nervous and couldn't explain why. He placed the fruit on the kitchen counter, then turned to her with that same gentle expression she had grown used to. "How is he feeling today?" he asked softly. "Better," she replied. "He's slowly getting stronger. The doctors are very happy with his progress." "That's good," he said. "I think about him a lot." She noticed the warmth in his voice and felt something stir inside her. She invited him to sit on the sofa, and they began talking about small things, little stories from the hospital, memories from the past months, and the simple events of their everyday lives. But beneath their conversation, there was a quiet feeling they both sensed, something deeper waiting to be understood. When silence finally filled the room between two conversations, she glanced at him and noticed he seemed thoughtful, almost hesitant. She wondered what he was thinking. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't know how to begin. She felt the same way. To ease the moment, she offered him tea. He smiled gratefully, and she went to the kitchen to prepare it. As she boiled the water, she tried to steady her breathing. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the quiet understanding forming in her heart. She realized she didn't want him to remain just a guest or a kind stranger. She wanted him to stay in her life. When she brought the tea back to the living room, she found him looking at a framed family photo on the wall. It was taken months before her brother fell ill. She remembered how happy they all looked in that picture. Seeing him stare at it with such gentle eyes made her chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. "You have a beautiful family," he said softly. "Thank you," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "You've become a part of it, you know." He paused, surprised. She felt her face warm with embarrassment, but she didn't take the words back. They were true, and spoken from her heart. "I'm glad," he finally said. "I care about all of you, a lot." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. She didn't look away. Instead, she let their eyes meet and hold. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds, but the silence felt more meaningful than words. She took a slow breath. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you," she said. He set his cup down carefully. "I've been wanting to tell you something too." They both laughed quietly at the same time, breaking the tension in a gentle way. He gestured for her to speak first. She hesitated, then began. When all this started, when my brother got sick, I felt like the world was collapsing around me. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid all the time. And then you came along. You didn't just help him. You helped me. You gave me strength even when you didn't realize it. You made the days easier. You gave me hope, truly. He listened without interrupting, and she felt her voice steady as she spoke. I don't know how to say this perfectly, but you've become very important to me. His expression softened into something warm and hopeful. I feel the same way, he said quietly. At first I just wanted to help. It didn't matter who you were or where you came from. I just wanted to do something good. But the more time I spent with you, the more I realized that I didn't want to disappear from your life after the donation. I didn't want to be just a name on a medical chart. I wanted to be someone who stayed. Her eyes grew warm with emotion. She felt relief, gratitude, and happiness blend together in her chest. You already are someone who stayed, she whispered. He leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. Then, is it all right if I stay longer? Not just as someone who helped, but as someone who wants to be a part of your life. Truly, her heart felt full as she nodded. Yes, I want that more than anything. He reached out slowly, giving her space to pull back if she wished. She didn't. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his touch. It felt peaceful, natural, and right. For a long moment they sat like that, holding hands, understanding without needing more words. Outside, the evening sky grew darker, but inside the house, everything felt bright and full of promise. The journey that began with fear had brought them to something unexpected, but beautiful. And for the first time in a very long while, she felt not just hopeful, she felt safe, cared for, and ready for a new beginning with the man who had helped save her brother, and quietly found a place in her heart.